Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthfication Chronicles, and on Sunday I was watching the Sunday Futures video, and I saw Kevin McCarthy in an interview, and he did a really good job talking about the impeachment, and he mentioned 10 questions that he had for Nancy Pelosi, and that he had sent her a letter. Well, you know what happens when somebody says they sent a letter. I go looking for them. So on October 3rd, he sent this letter that asked Pelosi 10 questions. She only answered 2, by the way. And so here's what it had to say. This morning, House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy sent a letter to Speaker Nancy Pelosi requesting all efforts surrounding her impeachment inquiry be suspended until customary rules and procedures are established and basic questions are answered. Given the monumental nature of attempting the removal of a duly elected sitting president, anything less than a thorough, transparent, and fair process would represent a supreme insult to our Constitution and the millions of Americans who rely on their voices being heard through our democratic system of government. Now, I'm going to put the link to that interview down below, and there's a clip I'll play later on. But right now, I want to actually go through the letter that he sent, and then we'll talk about the interview and some of the things he said there. So here's the letter, and remember this was October 3rd. And he says, Speaker Pelosi, I notice he didn't say dear. I wouldn't say dear either. I am writing to request you suspend all efforts surrounding your impeachment inquiry until transparent and equitable rules and procedures are established to govern the inquiry as is customary. As you know, there have been only 3 prior instances in our nation's history when the full House has moved to formally investigate whether sufficient grounds exist for the impeachment of a sitting president. I should hope that if such an extraordinary step were to be contemplated a 4th time, it would be conducted with an eye towards fairness, objectivity, and impartiality. Unfortunately, you have given no clear indication as to how your impeachment inquiry will proceed, including whether key historical precedents or basic standards of due process will be observed. In addition, the swiftness and recklessness with which you have proceeded has already resulted in committee chairs attempting to limit minority participation in scheduled interviews, calling into question the integrity of such an inquiry. Below are several questions to which I request a public response before the House of Representatives moves forward. So he asks, do you intend to hold a vote of the full House authorizing your impeachment inquiry? And he notices down here, for the impeachment of President Clinton, the full House authorized a formal impeachment inquiry by a vote of 258 to 176. And for the impeachment of President Nixon, the full House authorized a formal impeachment inquiry by a vote of 410 to 4. That is the precedent we've seen in our lifetime. So we have something to compare it to. And interestingly enough, we have a Democrat and a Republican that were in that situation. So it's interesting that we have seen when Clinton was being impeached, I believe it was a Republican Congress, it was a Republican held House, and when Nixon was being impeached, it was a Democrat held House. So it's exactly the same as the situation we have here. The president is of a different party than those who hold the House. So I'm really glad that he put that in there to point that out. This is what has been done in the past. Why aren't you following that? Is essentially what he's wondering. Do you intend to involve the full House in each critical step of this inquiry, including defining its scope and establishing its rules and procedures? Well, we know the answer to that one. No, they don't want us involved. And again, he gave this information down at the bottom. The committee report accompanying this resolution stated, because impeachment is delegated solely to the House of Representatives by the Constitution, the full House of Representatives should be involved in critical decision-making regarding various stages of impeachment. Okay, so then he goes on, he says, do you intend to grant co-equal subpoena power to both the chair and ranking member at the committee level? Yeah, well, that's not what she wants to have happen because she desperately does not want the ranking member in any of those committees to be able to subpoena people. Do you intend to require that all subpoenas be subject to a vote of the full committee at the request of either the chair or ranking member? Yeah, isn't that interesting? Would they be all voted on? If they were voted on, how many of these subpoenas that are not really subpoenas would be put out there? Yeah. Oh, and by the way, one of the reasons why they want to subpoena these people, and if you recall, I told you with that former ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, with her, she wanted to testify because she didn't like Trump because Trump fired her and she was an Obama holdover. So, she just had an axe to grind and she wanted to testify to Congress, but the White House had told her no. Well, they gave her a friendly subpoena so she could do that. Now, here's one of the reasons why. When they bring them in under a deposition with a subpoena there, that means that they can keep that deposition quiet. They can keep it from being released, and they can keep the members of Congress from talking about it. Of course, the Democrats don't think that they have to follow that rule. Then they run out to their little media lapdogs and they tell them immediately what was going on, but only the stuff that makes them look good or makes, President Trump look bad. So that's why they might give somebody what they called a friendly subpoena, which there's no such thing, but that's what they called them. And these aren't subpoenas anyway, because until they actually have the formal vote, then they can't do the impeachment inquiry. So what they're doing now is just some fake little investigation that really they're calling an impeachment inquiry, but it's really not until the whole House votes on it, which, McCarthy already mentioned here, as the precedent that has already been set. So, anyway, going on, do you intend to provide the president's counsel the right to attend all hearings and depositions? Oh, no, they don't want that either. Do you intend to provide the president's counsel the right to present evidence? Oh, no, again, they don't want that. They only want one side of the story. Do you intend to provide the president's counsel the right to object to the admittance of evidence? Oh, no, again, don't want that. Do you intend to provide the president's counsel the right to cross-examine witnesses? Oh, can you imagine? Oh, Cipollone would take out after them. Ooh, he's done a good job in the letters I've read of his, so I think he would really go at it. Do you intend to provide the president's counsel the right to recommend a witness list? Again, no, they don't want that because they don't want anybody testifying for Trump, although all the people they've had in there, what they're saying from, what the Republicans have been able to say is that they're supporting Trump. And everything that they say really supports Trump in this, and that there was no quid pro quo, and, everything was up and up. And there's no reason in the world why the impeachment should have started. So then the last one is, do you intend to refer all findings on impeachment to Chairman Nadler and the Judiciary Committee as prescribed by Rule 10 of the Rules of the House, or is Chairman Schiff in charge of leading this inquiry, as has been reported in the press? You see, this is all supposed to be going through the judiciary. And as I said the other day, Jerry Nadler's been kind of quiet. Now, he has been working. He has been doing some things. But when it comes to this whole impeachment thing, this has been placed in the lap of Adam Schiff with the House Intel, and then also that Elliot Engel, who is the chairman of the Foreign Affairs, and then Elijah Cummings, who was the head of the Oversight Committee. Now, I don't know who's going to be put in there in his place. My guess is possibly Connolly or Raskin. Maybe Raskin. He's been in on a lot of things. So, I don't know. Those are kind of my guesses. But, if you look over the committees there, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is on there, so who knows? Maybe they'll put her in charge. I think it's kind of odd that she's not been in charge of stuff. I mean, I don't want her to be, but I think it's just a little weird that she's not a chair of some committee. It just seems like, she likes power, so why wouldn't she be? But I don't know, maybe they thought it was better to have the other guys there. But anyway, going on with the letter, he says, by answering no to any of the above, you would be acting in direct contradiction to all modern impeachment inquiries of a sitting president. By answering no to any of the above, you would be denying the president the bare minimum rights granted to his predecessors. By answering no to any of the above, you would create a process completely devoid of any merit or legitimacy. At a news conference yesterday, you insisted, we have to be fair to the president. Yeah, right. If those words are taken to be sincere, the American people deserve assurance that basic standards of due process will be present. Given the enormity of the question at hand, the removal of a duly elected sitting president, anything less than a thorough, transparent, and fair process would represent a supreme insult to our Constitution and the millions of Americans who rely on their voices being heard through our democratic system of government. I look forward to your prompt response on this critical matter. And I want you to really take note of this, though. This supreme insult to our Constitution and the millions of Americans who rely on their voices being heard. Think about this for a second. And I kind of thought about this. This came to my mind when I was watching the interview. And I will have all the links down below so you can watch the full interview. But when you think about it, as long as they are doing this impeachment thing, and it's behind closed doors, so only the people on those committees can be a part of it. Because you remember, Matt Gaetz wanted to sit in on one of the depositions, and they wouldn't let him. So that means the only people who are really being represented in this are the people who have congressmen who are sitting on that committee. Anybody else can't. And if they were going to hold a vote for the entire House about going on with this impeachment inquiry, to do it formally like they're supposed to, then they have a little problem here, because the majority of the representatives can't access those depositions. They're not allowed to read them. Now, why would that be? If you're talking about a cover-up, you see, they claim that President Trump is covering up something with this whole transcript of the Ukrainian call, that there's something he's covering up. They just know it. They feel it in their bones. They know he's doing something wrong. But the thing is, if he's trying to cover things up and he's putting out the entire transcript of it, he's doing a really poor job of cover-up. You know, he's got to be one of the worst cover-up people in the world, because you don't do that. If you want to have it out there, if you know, when you put transcripts like that out, that is transparency. When you're hiding things and you're putting them behind closed doors and you're not allowing the full transcript to come out, but you leak little bits and pieces, which then people from the other side say that's not at all what they were saying. It's taken out of context, and when you read full context, it makes perfect sense, and it contradicts what you're trying to say it says. And that is not transparency. That is how you do a cover-up. So it just, seems to me that it's very obvious who's doing the cover-up on this. And when we're talking about this entire situation, we have to remember that if they are trying to overturn the 2016 election, which is essentially what an impeachment does, the impeachment says that the people made a bad choice and this president needs to be removed because the people chose poorly. It really takes away our voice, because we voted for him. We put him in office for a reason. Now, obviously, sometimes people get into that type of high office and they go a little power mad and really start doing some bad stuff. They have the possibility of that, like seducing interns, something along those lines. Well, that does happen. But in this case, Trump hasn't done anything wrong. There's nothing that should cause them to overturn our votes, because that's what they're doing. And we have to remember that, and we have to point that out to people who might come to us and say that they are for impeachment. We have to remind them that essentially what impeachment does is it nullifies an election, and it nullifies our voice. The people that voted for this president, it nullifies the will of those people. And that's something we really do have to take seriously. And that's why Kevin McCarthy here talks about it being a supreme insult to our Constitution, because it really is the anti-democratic thing. Because then you have a small group of people who are making all the decisions, and those decisions are contrary to what the majority of us wanted. That's what I wanted to point out to you. Let me play a little clip from this, and then I'll come back and cap things up.
People across America actually have a say in this process. And now they're bringing Adam Schiff, who has lied numerous times to the American public, in charge of this process, and they're denying members of Congress from even being in the room or hearing the transcripts and reading them of what's being said. Adam Schiff controls who can come into the room. So members who are on the committee, on Judiciary Committee and others, aren't even allowed in the room. And members who have to vote on this come down to the committee and they can't even read the transcripts. How is this fair?
So she came back to you and answered 2 questions, but she ignored the other questions? She said she's not going to bring it to the floor for a vote.
Well, she's not going to bring an impeachment inquiry, something we've always done in the past. And remember what we're talking about. You're changing the fabric of America. You're changing what democracy has said only because of your own political views. That is what is wrong. You want to trust democracy. And from a very important standpoint here, we need due process in this. A Republican speaker made sure this process happened with President Clinton. A Democrat speaker made sure this process happened with a Republican president. So why can't she follow the same process with such a serious question that's before us? Yeah. It's because she's letting politics play into it. Remember, so it's important that we have these conversations with Republicans, Democrats, and the administration, not get up and walk away, to run out to the stakes. And if you watch them speaking at that podium, all 3 of them talking at the same time, it's almost as they choreographed this, and it was always, if you listen to the final words, it was about impeachment. And before the Speaker of the House left the room, I listened to her, and she almost threatened the president. She didn't use the word impeachment, but you knew what she was talking about when she said something to the extent, you just wait to see what we do. Wow. I mean, that is an unbecoming of a speaker, and more importantly, that's not a real leader.
So, in that meeting, it appears that Nancy kind of made a threat to Trump. You know, I don't defend Trump saying all these nasty things about people, although I think when we finally find out what all these people have done, we're going to be really upset. And we will understand why he's using so many bad words for some of these people, and he's being so negative to them. I think that there probably is a very good reason, and he knows what they've done. But I'm not defending his choice of words sometimes. I would go a little less harsh, but that's just me. And for Trump, that's perfectly within line of his personality. I mean, that's who he is. That's who we voted in. We knew who he was. We voted for him anyway, because that's the person you want on the front line. You really do not want Mr. Polite on the front lines of a battle. You want somebody who's going to go in there and do the job. And probably they're going to be a little crude and rude, but that's what it takes sometimes to be a frontline warrior. So I don't have a problem with what he's doing. And so I'm sure he probably did antagonize her a little bit, but she's the one that got up and left. And I think it was scripted. I think they knew going in that's what was going to happen. And, you know, she took that paper that he handed to him, that he gave that letter to all of them. She took it and she just put it face down, basically saying, I'm not going to read this. And that was extremely disrespectful to our president. So I'm pretty sure that she was the one that had the meltdown and it wasn't Trump. I just don't see him as a meltdown kind of guy. I mean, he may toss insults to you, but I don't see him being somebody who's going to melt down in a business meeting. It just doesn't seem like his character. So anyway, that's what I've got for you. I wanted to play that so you could hear, yes, she kind of made a threat to him. Just wait to see what we do, and it's going to be interesting. They're desperate. They're really desperate. By the way, I did want to point out in the last video I did when I was talking about the travel arrangements, I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to go check some, when the Republicans were in charge before 2018 or whatever. And I will check to see if they made trips like this or if this is just the Democrats doing it. I'm kind of thinking it's just the Democrats at this point, but I do know that some Republicans have traveled to other countries. I know that John McCain did some traveling to different places. And so, I do know that that was going on, but I don't know to what extent. And when I was pointing out the information, the documents, and it was talking about that it was like $48,000 That was per diem. Okay, per day. So that's all I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.